time for another edition of Unlocked with Fox's Brock Huard. I'm Lance Taylor from The Next Round. It is on Disrupt the Media. Like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up. It is always brought to you by MyBookie. Use that code NEXTROUND. Get that first deposit bonus from mybookie.ag. Happy holidays to the West Coast.
Sir. Yes, sir. What best gift you got under the tree was?
Oh, I can't believe I got a pause like this. No, this is the ironic gift of the year. I've got a neighbor. He's retired, and all he does is blow leaves. And it drives me absolutely insane. And when I say all the time, I'm not exaggerating. I'm talking about every day he blows leaves.
And it's loud. He's got, I mean, for that guy, he's got a professional loud gas blower.
Yeah, so this has become kind of a part of the show on The Next Round. And I've sent out some social media. I've actually gone to his house before and asked him to stop blowing leaves. But he continues to do so. So girlfriend's family gave me a leaf blower. Now, I don't know if they knew the story behind it, but I thought it was a little ironic that I got a gift that is a leaf blower. I'm not a guy. I used to do landscaping when I would come home from college. But since then, Rodrigo does all of my yardscape, and I am completely fine with that. So what about you? Anything good?
Got some clothes. I'm pretty easy. I don't need much. My girls know dad well. They got me some bath salts, some bubble bath stuff because I'm a bath guy. I think I've told you that before.
Oh no.
Oh, I'm a bath guy. That's where I do my thinking, bro. That's where my mind like gets my show ready.
I love your mind, but do you at least get out and shower after you bathe?
At times, but you got to always use bubbles. Like Ben Hartsock, we were doing a show on Sirius one time, and he's like, yeah, you talked about all these baths, and I took calls. We took calls from across the country, the guys that said, it's actually pretty good for your nervous system, and it's great for my back and my neck. And
get a hot tub though. You're more of a man.
I have a hot tub. But poor Ben, he tried to take a bath. He's like, yeah, my wife ran the bath for me. I got in there, and he's like, I just kept looking at my ham roll the whole time. I'm like, no. You need bubbles. I will never take a bath unless I've got a lot of soap bubbles. Like I ain't looking at myself. So
no, it's buoyant. So I mean, it's gonna bob straight up. So you've got to have bubbles. I agree with you. I hadn't taken one of those in a long time, and I just got I got my master bath redone, and so I've got one of those claw tubs that kind of sits in the middle. Okay. And it hadn't been used. And I've had the master bath redone for like 4 months, and I've just got no desire to jump in there.
Okay, that's fine.
That's so my kids got me. I'm a West Coast guy, and I'm a Rams guy, and Lakers and Dodgers and USC, and they got me a candle that's supposedly supposed to smell like Dodger Stadium.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you've seen this gimmick out there now. It's probably a $40 or $50 candle, but they've got them from a lot of the major campuses. Like they gave me Lawrence, Kansas, because I spent a lot of time in Kansas doing play-by-play. Yeah. So they gave me Lawrence, Kansas, and Dodger Stadium, and I was like, "What is Dodger Stadium's going to smell like?"
Money.
Like criminals, like crime, and some beer.
A little smog, yes.
Yeah, some money though. So I lit it, and I couldn't figure out what it smelled like. It smelled okay. It didn't necessarily smell like Dodger Stadium, but I thought it was a unique gift.
That is cool. That's very cool. What did Lawrence, Kansas smell like?
Same thing. I couldn't really tell. It was supposed to be like oak and championships and nylon and a bunch of bullshit that doesn't exist. Okay, so speaking of West Coast, Pac-12 is about to come to a conclusion as we record this. USC is about to play their final Pac-12 game, and obviously Washington is one of the 4 last standing. So the Pac-12 will at least go out with a little college football playoff flair there. But you were a guy that grew up, not only played in the league, watched your older brother play in the league. You grew up going to games. I mean, it really is a sad day. I know SEC fans, Big Ten fans don't really care. But if you're a college football fan, the Pac-12, back to the Pac-8, Pac-10, Pac-12 gave us some incredible moments, especially when people just wanted to continue to watch college football into the wee hours of Sunday. And to me, it's a sad day, and it's a sad conclusion.
Yeah, golly, there's been all these moments, Lance, where it kind of hits you, and for me, getting to do the final Civil War in Apple Cup, I think we talked about this, and that was one of my first times that I've ever called my bosses at Fox and just said, hey, for whatever it's worth, our crew will do whatever to be a part of that. And remember, we did the game in Eugene. We took buses up, guys didn't sleep, camera crew, set up, one to the other. And it hit me that day that this is the last time, right? both in Eugene and in Seattle. Like this is, I know they're going to keep playing and like Iowa and Iowa State, and we'll see how long that ultimately does last, but not as conference members, not at the end of the year, not with all the history and not with all of the everything that comes with a century of playing one another as brothers. Now you're going to be, just college football peers. And it's going to be a really neat non-conference game in September, like Cyhawk, Iowa State, but it won't be the Apple Cup. It won't be the Civil War. Those days are gone. So it hit me then. I got to be honest though, Lance, every time I look at these projections for next year, like the Big Ten, and here's the 4 projected best team, I'm like, it just doesn't feel right. Like Oregon, SC, Washington, Big Ten. Like what are we doing? Stanford and Cal in the ACC?
Yeah,
what are we even talking about here? What are we doing?
I get Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC. I mean, at least it seems kind of like a fit, but
somewhat regional and somewhat unbelievable fan bases and somewhat close in geographic proximity.
Yeah, I don't like any of the realignment, to be honest with you. I mean, I like the original members. You can add some pieces here and there, but I absolutely hate this. So if I asked you your top Pac-12 moment actually playing, and then just as a fan, your top 12 Pac moment that just sitting on the couch or in the stands.
Well, I would say the 91 Husky National Championship team. And part of this is prisoner of the moment. We had Billy Joe Hobart on a podcast that I did. And Billy Joe played for my dad. He was originally Bill, and then he became Billy. And then by the time he got to UW, it was Billy Joe. And there weren't, I guess there weren't any more names he could have added to that.
Are you being serious? He really was like Bill in high school?
He was Bill Hobart when he transferred in his sophomore year. He was Bill Hobart. And then he became Billy by the end when he was a state champion. And then when he went to UW, he became Billy Joe. And maybe if he'd have been a Super Bowl winner, I don't know, Billy Joe Paul Hobart, maybe he would have just continued to add. I don't know. But yeah, that 91 team for me, just growing up, I was at that Rose Bowl. I can still picture Lance. Have you been to, you're going to the Rose Bowl?
Yeah. Well, I've never been to, this is weird. So 09 was national championship, went Alabama, Texas. 13 with Florida State and Auburn was at that game. This will be the first true Rose Bowl that I will attend.
Well, I don't know if you remember the first time in the Rose Bowl Stadium. It's a little bit like Dodger Stadium, back to your candle. It's not like from afar aesthetically, they're the most beautiful. They're older, but you walk in, especially the Rose Bowl, and I can still, like, I'm colorblind. I don't have a great sense of smell. I got big hands. I could throw a football a little bit, but that was about it talent wise. But when I walked into and through, like, you kind of walk around and then you go through the tunnel to your seat, and I can still close my eyes and just picture the colors on that field, the paint of Michigan, the paint of the purple of Washington, the road, like, oh my gosh, it was just magical. I mean, it was truly like, they had a helicopter. I think the day before the game, I was watching the news because they had a little rain.
Were you a junior or senior in high school?
Ooh, in 91, no, I would have been like 8th grade, 7th, 8th grade.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So nope, I was a junior high, but totally into ball. And Damon was redshirting that year. Billy was playing. We took the caravan, drove it 20 hours from Puyallup to LA. We couldn't afford to fly as a family, but we're down there, and just walking through and seeing the glow and just the majesty and the magical nature of that, and then an unbelievable game to boot. So that would be by far just the biggest, most memorable conference moment as they were national champs. I would say, sheesh, the Apple Cups were all fun and entertaining. We played at Arizona State. The most, memorable moment, we, completed a 4th and 16 after I butchered a 3rd and 3 option pitch. And we were top 10 in the country, ASU top 10 in the country, first game of the year. And and have a 4th and 17, 68-yard completion in the final 30 seconds of the game. That one was, that was one I'll never, ever forget. One for the ages.
Wow. So back to the colorblind. I know we talked about this like back in September on Unlocked. And by the way, it's Fox's Brock Huard, brought to you by Lance'sLock.com. Jump on board. We've got the NFL playoffs coming up, which we will get to. We've still got a lot of bowl games. We've got NBA, college basketball action, always a free play. Lance'sLock.com. So you can see purple.
Ish.
You can see green, though?
I can't differentiate. So any of your colorblind listeners that are going to watch this are going to nod along with me when I say this, because a lot of them are going to be in the same vein as I am. I can't differentiate purple and blue. If you stuck up a purple and a blue right next to each other, I'm just guessing. If you put green and brown right next to each other, I'm just guessing. So I know it's in those families. Like I know that's a
Yeah.
blue or purple. I know that's a green or brown. I know that, some of the oranges and reds get a little tough sometimes too. So differentiating those are difficult for me.
Wow. So I wonder
Yeah.
if you really see purple or if you see blue. Now, so there are some greens. Like I'm wearing, like, this is kind of an olive, but it could almost be a brown. So I'm not really
Yeah.
sure.
I'd have no clue if that's
Yeah.
green or brown.
So
No
like
chance.
a really dark blue could be black to
Yes.
me. It
Okay.
could be like a gray. So I think maybe everybody's got a little bit of about that, but I think you
No,
obviously
that's just whiskey brain damage for you. That's what
okay.
you're saying. Yeah,
It's
that's not
possible.
colorblindness.
What do you think you see in purple or blue? You have no idea?
No idea. Yeah. I just know it's in that family. I just know it's in that purple or blue
Okay, when I
family.
say regal, like blue is
Mhm.
cold. I'll never forget there was a movie called it was called Mask. Not The Mask, but Mask. And it was with it's a true story about Rocky Dennis. Eric
Yeah.
Stoltz played the kid,
Yeah, the
Cher
guy
was
with
in
the
it, Sam
all
Elliott.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
But he was dating I think it was Helen Hunt was the character, or God, it wasn't Helen Hunt, it was the other chick. I'll think of it in a second. Laura Dern. And he's trying to teach her character who is blind how to be able to like what colors mean. And so he does the hot with the red and the cold with the blue. So like to me, blue is kind of cold, and then purple is
Mhm.
like regal when you think of
Mhm.
like something. So I don't know
Yeah.
what pops to you.
No, I think that's totally fair, and come Monday night, that purple is gonna look really good. It's one of the best uniforms. Frankly, Texas and Washington, 2 of the better uniforms in all of college football, in my opinion.
Yeah. So
Texas, very, very simple. That gold of Washington with the purple just pops. It's gonna be unbelievable in the Sugar Bowl, and I need to know right now, Lance, are you taking Washington in the 4 points?
yeah, I want to get to this with you because somebody called earlier and they asked, how do you rank the quarterbacks? How do you rank the coaches? And the quarterbacks, I said Penix was 1.
Yeah.
I went Ewers 2. I went Milrow 3, and I went McCarthy 4. Now JJ hasn't been 100%. I get that he hasn't been in spots where he needed to take a game over, but that's how I see it with the way they're
Okay.
playing right now. And the coaches, I went Nick Saban 1, Kalen
Mm,
DeBoer 2, Harbaugh 3, and Sarkisian 4. And
mm.
Dunaway's like, no, Sark's number 2, and I'm like, Sark was 34-29 at 4 years at Washington. My
Yep.
man DeBoer is 24-2 right now. The dude, all he does is beat ranked teams. All he does is win one score games.
Yep.
And when you win one possession games against quality opponents, to me, a lot of that is coaching.
Yes.
So I think DeBoer is number 2. I think Washington is going to win this game. You're the expert. I'll let you get more into it. If you say Washington, people are going to call you a homer, but I know you're objective.
Yep.
And to me, there are 3 teams playing with house money in this college football playoff. That is Washington in year 2 under DeBoer. That is Texas in year 3 under Sarkisian. I think based on where Alabama was in September and where they are right now and all the national championships they have, Alabama fans should be
Yep.
through the roof. They're where they are right now. And then the one team that has to win is Michigan. The other 3 coaches, I think it's a great year for all 3 of those fan bases and coaches. With all that said, how do you think this thing plays out?
Yeah, I'd probably take those 4 points in Washington. I think it could be a 3-point game, right? I mean, I think I could see a 31-28 Washington win, a 35-31. I could certainly see Texas, find a way at 31-28. But those 4 points, that feels like a big number to me. This feels closer to a pick 'em. I saw both teams twice this year. I will say this to you, Lance. If you had my producer, Bo Garrett, on, if you had Jason Benetti and Allison Williams, if you had Darren Foster or my director on, and we had all of us on this call, and you asked us point blank, who was the prettiest team, like just physically, the eye test, which team that you guys saw, and we saw all of them this year. I didn't see the SEC, I didn't see Bama, but we saw every one of these other teams. Who was the prettiest to the eye? No question, it was Texas. I mean, we walked in there, and I remember this vividly. We had them versus Rice in the opener, and it was 195 freaking degrees. It was so hot. But thankfully, they had their pregame or the day before workout indoors. And I remember walking in, and Lance, I'm like, man, I don't know if it's the shorts or what it is, but every one of these guys just had ham hocks. Like they spent their time in the off season, step ups and squats. And then I looked to their D line. I had to call their SID over, Bianco over. I said, hey man, they don't have numbers on. Like, I think I know who I know who Tavondre Sweat is. He looks different than all the rest, and I'm pulling out my little board here for you. But walk me through, which one is Broughton? Which one's Collins? Which one's Murphy? Which one is Trill Carter? Which one? because they all looked, huge and massive on that D line. And that doesn't happen. Like you go to Washington's walkthrough, you'd be like, okay, there's Tuli Nasanoa, he's a big 305-pound guy. And, there's Ale, he's 330 converted guard. And then there's pretty big drop off to their backups. And that's most common all around college football, not at Texas. So that struck me week one right away.
I think there's something to that. In 2009, going back to my first Rose Bowl experience, Mac Brown brought Texas in, and Alabama, in year 3 under Nick Saban, and getting off the bus, you could tell a difference. I mean, Alabama was that physical team. Yes. And in 2012, it was even more obvious against Notre Dame.
Yep.
But there is something to that.
Yes, there is. And it didn't surprise me that they went on the run this year. And when Oklahoma beat them, they got them running. And that will be hugely critical Monday night. If this is like a 3-and-out, if this is a 5-play punt, if they don't, because that's what they did to Oregon in the Pac-12 title game. If you remember how that game started, Washington had a long sustained drive. They threw a bubble screen and flat routes and bubbles, and they got Oregon running and just gassed, because that was the best defensive line in front seven and certainly west of the Rocky Mountains. But they gassed them. And then the next drive, they go down and score. They get a 3-and-out, and it's 10-0, right? They just jump on them right away. And you're like, wow, that if they can do that to Texas, because that's what Oklahoma did. Oklahoma ran to T'Vondre Sweat. There were times, Lance, I was watching that game tape, and he couldn't, there was a run play, and he literally, gets off the ball, takes 2 steps, and then just I ain't running that thing down. I can't move. I just, they didn't sub, and they played with a little bit of tempo, and they just kept those bigs on the field and did to Texas what really no one else did, and that's wore them down. Washington's got the capability within their system to motion and shift and spread and to bubble screen and to get the ball out. And last year in the matchup at the Alamo Bowl, right, they sustained drives. They didn't sub. They kept those guys on the field. And I think that's going to be key. But that's going to be a game, to me, won by a team in the 30s. And I think the game in Pasadena is going to be a team won in the 20s. So I think they're going to feel and look a little bit different.
Before we get to that game, with this kind of layoff, I would assume it favors the better coach. And look, we can have, this is subjective. Mm-hmm. There are some people out there that think Sark is a better coach. I personally think DeBoer is that better coach. But is there something to having the time off, the better coach? And I know there's also something to a team that comes in and they're so hot and they're in sync offensively. Mm-hmm. And we saw this in 2010 with both Oregon and Auburn, and the offense just doesn't play like it played.
Yep.
But overall, just scheming and getting the game plan ready, is there something to that?
I think both these guys are awesome offensively, and their staffs are awesome. And Kyle Flood and the trust that he and Sark have through all their years in the NFL and college together, and the rest of their staff, Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, awesome. So, and I think, frankly, Lance, if you had me and Lugs and Joel and McElroy and and Herbie, and you had 10 of us, right? And you asked this question on the next round and said, hey, who are give me the 3 or 4 best schemers, play callers, innovators in college football on offense? I think every one of us would not go very far without saying Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, and Steve Sarkisian, right? Because Ryan Grubb calls it. So it's DeBoer and his system. It's been their system for decades. So those 2 and Sark, they're going to be on the list. They're going to be on one hand for sure of the best in all of college football. I asked Sark earlier this year in that opener, I said, who do you lean into? Like Lance, at the next round, he goes and he studies, the best radio guys in the country and around the world. If I know Lance, right, he tries to always up his game and sharpen himself. And I said to Sark, it's a question that I like to ask these coaches. Who do you study? Who do you learn from? Who do you spend your off season analyzing and taking video of and watching what they're doing? And no hesitation. Do you know the name he referenced right away?
Oh, Sarkisian is going to go Cal Shanahan.
Perfect. Boom. Nailed it. Crushed it. And they have time together, and they have spent time coaching together, and that is his guy. And he's in that McVay Shanahan tree. That's how he does it. And if you ask anybody in the NFL who's the best play designer, the best play schemer, the best play caller, it's McVay, it's Shanahan, and it's probably nobody close right now at the NFL level. So both of these guys are going to have their offenses ready to go. Both of them are going to try to take apart some weaknesses. Both defenses they're facing have some weaknesses. Texas has a true freshman corner that plays a lot. The other 2 corners are pretty league average. They got a little undersized nickel, right? They've got some places. One of their linebackers doesn't cover particularly well. So they've got spots to pick apart. Washington, the same. How healthy are their safeties? They finally got a little healthier year end. If they're fully ready to go, then they're not as vulnerable back there as they have been through the second half of the season. They've got a very average corner. They got some undersized linebackers. So there's going to be places for both of these guys to pick apart. And that's why, like I said, I think this winner is going to be somewhere in the 30s.
Okay. Well, you got a one possession game here. You lean Washington, at least in the Sugar Bowl. So we go to the other
one
side.
more thing, by the way, just one other little nugget that is a bit surprising. Texas situationally on defense is awesome. Second in the country on third down defense, number 12 in the country in red zone defense. So situationally, they're awesome defensively. Offensively, they're putrid. Offensively, you look at the numbers and you're like, how? How is that possible with Quinn Ewers, with Worthy, with the run game, with his offensive line, tight end, Sanders, Austin? How are you 69th in the country in third down conversions? How are you in the hundreds in scoring red zone touchdowns? Like, those things don't really add up. And those aren't like a little anomaly. They were the same thing the year before. Those were the two areas going into this season that I asked Sark about. And he pointed to some protection. He pointed to Quinn, who did get a little more creative this year, was able to use his legs a little bit. But watch that in particular. When you're watching Monday night, third downs and red zone. Who wins those? And if Texas does not up their game there and score touchdowns and stay on the field, then it might be more than a one-score game in favor of the Huskies.
Yeah. I mean, like last year, Texas, one of the reasons I thought that they would be so much improved, 8-5 last year, all 5 losses by 7 or less.
That's right. One score.
And a lot of that comes down to, not converting those red zone opportunities. So I do agree with you. Fascinating game. Can't wait for it. Other side, Rose Bowl, Alabama, Michigan. Michigan's still a 1.5-point favorite. Everybody I talk to that is on the inside, guys like you are like, wait, Michigan's favored? I don't see what Las Vegas is seeing here.
Right.
But I don't know what to say about Michigan offensively. I have no idea, Brock, because they haven't had to do anything. Like, they've just been able to hand it off to Blake Corum and I think Zach Zinter not playing an All-American guard. That's big. But defensively, for people that think Alabama's going to go out and slay this defense, I don't see that. I mean, so I know you said it plays into the 20s. How do you think ultimately who wins and why?
Yeah, the second most impressive team, by the way, purely eye test, was Michigan. And again, I didn't get to see Alabama. Georgia probably would be right there, if not better, if I got to see them right off the bus. But for us, the second best team we saw was Michigan because their front was gnarly. They play 4 different ends. They're all 250 plus pounds, which you have to have against Milroe and have to have against Alabama to set that edge, to set that run game, to keep him between the tackles where he's not at his best, and keep him in the run game contained. You need edge players. They play 4 of them. They're all really good. They're 2D tackles. One of them's a 330-pound monster. The other's Chris Jenkins' son, a little bit undersized at 290, but unbelievably athletic. They can roll there. Their linebackers are 240 and 250 pounds. They can both play. So their front is salty. Their front is SEC-esque. Their front is going to be able physically to go toe-to-toe with Alabama in ways they never would have, Lance, in 09 and 12 and 16. So that is why, as I said, I think this game's in the 20s. You ranked your quarterbacks, and I ranked mine a little bit different. I put Penix at number 1. I actually put J.J. McCarthy at number 2. And maybe I'm totally biased because I love winners. I love those that just elevate everybody around him no matter what the situation is. And he has done that. He's changed Michigan. He's going to, if Jim wants to be there, he's going to have a $100 million contract, and he can point to J.J. McCarthy as the difference maker over the 10-plus years he's been there because he's the one that walks in the room. He's the one that walks in the huddle, and the guys believe it no matter what it takes. And if we run it every time against Penn State because he's nicked up, fine. If he's got to run and scramble and make plays to do so against Ohio State and beat Ohio State back-to-back seasons, he's capable of doing it. So I actually put JJ number 2. I'll put Milroe 3. And for me, Quinn, because of those situations, because of that stage, because I need to see him do it against a quality crew for 4 quarters, I probably put him number 4 on that QB list. So I would give I understand where Vegas is coming from because I think they point to JJ. I think they point to Jim. I think they point to a style that says kind of like Pete Carroll in the NFL play, frankly, Lance, which bothers me a lot as a fan and as an analyst of them. But it is, hey, man, we played a game to get to the fourth quarter, and then we're going to find a way to win.
Okay, let me ask you this, though. If they get down 10 or 14 points, and look, nobody wants to be in that situation, but when you look at it, and you don't see this a lot, Alabama's got not 1 but 2 All-American cornerbacks, Terrion Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Yep.
Is J.J. McCarthy good enough to beat those guys as guys on the edge?
He's going to have to do it running. He's going to have to do it with his tight ends. He's going to have to do it in play action. He's going to have to do it. He may have to run for 80 yards plus in this game, maybe 100 yards. And if he's fully healthy, and maybe this 5-week layoff was the best thing for him, we don't really know exactly what was going on physically with him. They kept that pretty darn quiet. But I think this is a game where you've got to say, hey, man, you're going to have to tuck it. And if those guys are covered up on the perimeter, and you know what, we get in some of our spread stuff, we're gonna have to run you a ton, or it's gonna be you and Blake, and it's gonna put those guys in a little bit of conflict on the other side and make them read and make them think and make them react a little bit, and then the play action off of it. He's not gonna throw for 300 yards. They do not have that kind of personnel, to your point, to attack those All-American kind of corners. It's going to be tight ends. It's going to be run game. It's going to be messy. It's going to be ugly. It's a game that they would love to win 20-17. Heck, they'd love to win 12-10 if they have to. And I don't think he or that team is afraid of playing that style.
I continue to hear this, and I believe it based on, watching Michigan a lot this year. They haven't seen a quarterback like Jalen Milroe. But I'll ask you this. When McCarthy was healthy, how much of a benefit was it for this defense to see him even in practice?
A little bit. Yeah, you're not going good on good a ton. Now, you may lead up to this game and do a little bit more than you do in the regular season, Lance. Maybe there's one period a day in practice during the season where you'll go good on good, right? Starters versus starters. But there's usually very little of that, and certainly very little contact involved with it. Now, as you crank up over this 5-week stretch, have you spent maybe a little bit of time doing that? Possibly. Have you maybe put a different guy that's not a quarterback into some of those modes and some of that scout team spot to run around and try to extend those plays and play with the speed that Milroe plays with? You can. But ultimately, it's going to come down to what I said, those edges and those guys setting that edge and making sure you just swallow that pocket. What they did to C.J. Stroud 2 years ago, right? And what they've done at times to talented quarterbacks is and I know that feeling, and it's a miserable feeling. You want air. You want space. It'll be the same thing in Texas, Washington. Both teams will try to do the same against quality QBs, right? You want to make them, you want to suffocate them, you want to suck the air out of that pocket and squeeze it. The better each of those teams do in these matchups, the better likelihood that team's going to win.
It is Unlocked with Fox's Brock Huard here on Disrupt the Media. Make sure you like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up. It is brought to you by MyBookie. Use that code NEXTROUND. Get that first deposit bonus from mybookie.ag. So Christmas night, everybody felt like it was the two best teams in the NFL as Baltimore headed to San Francisco to take on the Niners. People were like, why is San Francisco a 6.5-point favorite? And I told them at lanceslock.com because San Francisco is the best team in the NFL by far. I laid the 6.5. Brock Purdy comes out, completely shits the bed, 4 picks. I think that's an anomaly, though. Am I wrong? I don't think that's going to happen again. I think San Francisco gets to reset from this point on. Final 2 regular season games. We'll see if they play the starters in the final week and then to the playoffs. Do you have any concerns with San Francisco?
Not in the NFC. There's not a Baltimore in the NFC. And Philadelphia is not that anymore up front. I don't know what's really happened to them, Lance. That, to me, is one of the biggest surprises this year. And I know they lost Hargrave and some of their personnel, but my gosh, last year they were so dominant in their front, and they are not that way anymore. So there is no Baltimore.
They've gotten worse, right? First 10 games of the season, I was like, they're not as good as they were last year, right? But they're still one of the 3 best teams in football.
Yes, and now that's kind of deteriorating, and there's a lot of finger pointing. There's a lot of issues there, but just like to a man, just physically, they're not what they were a season ago. And there's not that team in the NFC. Detroit is not equipped. Hutchinson's a nice player, but they're not equipped in any way to do what Baltimore does, and that is just an onslaught of 7 or 8 D linemen, 2 of the best, fastest linebackers going in the game, and they punched San Fran. I mean, they just physically punched them right in the face, offensively, defensively. They knocked dudes out of the game. Right. Trent Williams goes down with a groin, changes the whole game. Backup tackle goes down with an injury. So they just physically harass them and physically punish them. And no, I don't think there's another team in the NFC that will be the 1 seed. They will get that bye. But some of those injuries, what that game showed you is that Purdy does have to have some people in front of him, right? He does have to have what I just got done talking about, some of that space and some of that air in the pocket. Not the biggest guy, not the strongest arm guy, but if he is protected and plays in rhythm, he is still very, very dominant. Baltimore took him out of both of those things, hit him harassed him, knocked the ball around, knocked people out of the game. Yeah, and I think just made a statement that, you know what, we don't like being underdogs. We never should have been an underdog, and we're the most physical team going in the NFL today.
Well, this leads me perfectly to our final point here on the NFL and the chaos the playoff picture is right now, because my Rams sit there at 8-7, and if they win out,
Seahawks at 8-7, yep,
yeah, they win out, they're there. It doesn't matter what happens. The fear is they go to New York, they play the Giants, they're 6.5-point favorites, but then they close at San Francisco. And with San Francisco losing to Baltimore, San Francisco might have to win out to get that number 1 overall seed. Yep. I will say, watching the Rams play Baltimore 2 weeks ago, I think they're as good as anybody right now in the NFL. I really do. When they're playing their best, just the way Stafford is playing right now, the way that offensive line, Kyron Williams is a different maker in the backfield, best running back Sean McVay has had up until this point. So the NFC right now,
best running back since Gurley, healthy Gurley, right?
Yeah. I pull that back 100%. Todd Gurley in 18 and 17 was incredible.
Yes.
Okay, so of those teams though, like Philadelphia doesn't scare you. Detroit doesn't scare me just based on the fact that it's Detroit. I don't know why. They're obviously better than they've been. But of these wild card teams, Seattle, the Rams, possibly Minnesota, maybe even Tampa Bay, if they go on to win. Do any of those teams could one of those teams make a run to the NFC Championship game?
Gosh, San Francisco is tough. That last game of the regular season will be fascinating to see, and we'll see just how healthy both are. And it always comes down to that, Lance. Like, you know, the Rams have put it together. The Rams have been able to stay healthy, right? And had their horses, and there's Cooper, and there's Stafford, and Puka Nacua, and the Kyron's back. And like, this league is so much about that. I hate to just fall back on that always, but it is more than when I played 20 years ago, you know, and I don't know if that's the way guys train or the way guys seemingly get hurt or the way they don't practice much anymore, for whatever reason, it just seemingly always comes down to attrition. And if you tell me the Rams have everybody, and they're all going, and they are fully healthy, you're right. I think they match up with every one of those teams, certainly better than my Seahawks do. Right? I mean, the Seahawks are still a flawed team. They can't win the line of scrimmage. They don't stop the run. They don't run the ball well. And the Rams have been able to do that. So we point to the playoffs, and we'll continue to do this. And I love this. And I missed you last week, man. That was not fun missing one of these segments with you. But as we do, it's the line of scrimmage and it's attrition. You tell me who's got it going the most at the line of scrimmage, and you tell me the team that's the healthiest, and those are the teams that are going to be standing there in February at the end. And
the only hole I would shoot in your theory is, now that we go to the AFC, that playoff picture is, how in the hell do the Cleveland Browns continue to win? And I know they've got a really good defense, but when you lose Deshaun Watson and Nick Chubb, they're
salty at the line of scrimmage, man. They are freaking salty at the line of scrimmage on both sides of it. And, you know, we've seen some of these stories, man, some of the storybook stuff, like are you serious? Joe freaking Flacco? Really? Joe Flacco off the couch? Yeah, Joe Flacco, because he can still throw a ball 80 yards, and he's just given these guys life, and he can spin it much better than Deshaun could spin it, and better than DTR could spin it, and better than anybody else there could spin it. And man, line of scrimmage still holds true. Holds true on Titus's 8th grade football team, holds true on the high school state championship game that I watched here in Colorado, holds true at the collegiate level, which we'll see Monday night, and then certainly in the NFL, line of scrimmage still plays.
Okay, San Francisco, I feel like, is going to get the 1 seed in the NFC, but in the AFC, it really comes down to 2 teams right now, and they play this weekend, Baltimore hosting Miami. And what's crazy is, if Miami was to lose to Baltimore and then lose to the Buffalo Bills in the season finale, Buffalo would actually win the East. Miami could drop all the way to a 6 seed.
Yep.
But how important is it, not only for these 2 teams, but for the entire AFC? Like, Baltimore wins, they've got home field. You got to go through Baltimore. Miami wins, you got to go through Miami. I know there's some heat concerns and things like that. The only way Miami can go to a Super Bowl is to get the 1 seed.
Agreed.
But I would think all of the other teams in the AFC want Miami to get that number 1 seed outside of Baltimore, right?
Totally agree. And I think when Baltimore, and I think you and I talked about this before the season, some of our preseason predictions and everything else. And I think did you have Baltimore in the Super Bowl? I
had Baltimore against the Eagles.
Yep. And I think I had Baltimore, San Fran maybe, or something like that. But it feels like, gosh, when Baltimore plays motivated, when they're on tilt, when they just want it and they've got any kind of edge. And certainly Monday night, all of the national talking heads and that line and everything else put such a boulder on their shoulder that they went in there and just knocked the bully out. And the biggest challenge now is coming off a little shorter week, expending all that energy, expending all of that emotion. They're the favored team this week. You're not hearing people, diminish the Ravens. You're having to handle prosperity, which is still very difficult to do in sport. But when they play to their talent, when they play to their standard, when they play their best, Lance, I think the Ravens will be the number 1 seed.
Okay, when we talk again, our national championship matchup will be?
Give me Washington, Michigan. What everybody wanted in the Rose Bowl anyway. At least everybody on the West Coast wanted. Yeah. Give me a Washington, Michigan remake of the 1991 national title, quasi-national title Rose Bowl.
Oh. Okay, so Alabama fans have already penciled themselves into Houston because I've talked to a lot of people. We're not going. We're saving our money for Houston. And if Texas wins the Sugar Bowl, that ticket's going to be massive. It doesn't matter if it's Michigan or Alabama right there in Houston.
Yep.
But I've talked to Alabama fans, and I'm like, who would you rather play, Washington for the first time or Texas? And they all say we'd rather play Washington. I'm like, you're insane. First of all, Texas would have to beat you twice in a year.
Yep.
The ticket is going to be so much more expensive if it's Texas.
Yep.
But people don't realize Kalen DeBoer doesn't lose against ranked teams. And if he beats Texas, that's just going to be another notch in his belt.
No, but I think a lot of the Alabama fans, have that feeling and that perception that you've got to change if you're a West Coast team. And that is, man, get on this stage and it's bully ball. We're bigger, we're stronger, more physical. It's, what Booger McFarland was saying with big boy football. And they saw it in 2016 and they've seen it with Oregon in in this new playoff. And they saw it with Oregon versus Auburn. And they're just not going to buy that a finessey West Coast team is going to win on that stage because that's not really happened since Pete Carroll in the 2000s, and he built a team that was very much an SEC-esque big boy football team as well. So, I can't wait. It's going to be an awesome, awesome New Year's. Can't wait to do this next week, and holy cow, we're going to have a lot to talk about down the stretch.
Okay, well, look, enjoy your travels. You're going to New Orleans, right?
I am saving up for Houston.
Okay. So, here we go. Washington a little confident too. New Orleans probably not your scene anyway. I've never been to Bourbon Street and had a nice glass of passing time.
I was on Bourbon Street at 1 a.m. after Carter Blackburn took me to some place and down some stairs, and I left there sprinting like Forrest Gump back to the hotel. Like, where am I? Yeah, and there's horse manure everywhere. There's crazies out here. So no, New Orleans not my kind of town. Great place.
I love it. I love it.
Have a lot of fun, but get me to Houston next week.
You were probably in a place called the Dungeon, if I'm guessing.
Oh, who knows? It's been some years, and I tried to flush that scary memory away.
Okay, well, look, enjoy the games. Happy New Year to you and the Huard family. Look forward to doing this like you next week, and we'll have a lot to talk about.
Oh, we sure will. Let me give you one last piece of New Year's advice. Take that blower over to your neighbor's house and blow his leaves, and it will blow his mind.
He'd probably shoot me.
Go blow his leaves and blow his mind. That's my only counsel.
I love this advice. I'm going to have to make this poll question on the next round tomorrow. Okay. Again, Happy New Year. It has been Unlocked with Fox's Brock Huard right here on Disrupt the Media. Like, subscribe, give us that thumbs up. It is always brought to you by LancesLock.com. Free play every single day. Jump on board. Bowl package, the playoffs. Go to LancesLock.com. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. See you, bud.